This is PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Pop Daily on this Monday, April 21st. It's a very busy day, of course, with big news that the world is following of Pope Francis passing away at the age of 88. And the reason I'm mentioning it on Pop Daily is because a lot of political leaders are already sounding off and expressing their condolences, including Mayor Eric Adams, who met with Pope Francis individually, Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, who met with Pope Francis individually. And of course, just yesterday, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, had a one-on-one meeting where he said to the Pope, I hope you are feeling better. Shortly after that, of course, we got the news that Pope Francis died at the age of 88. So a lot of elected leaders now sounding off about this as we gear up now for the papal conclave, which has to take place within 20 days or less from this happening. So that's just the political leaders who are already responding and sounding off, including the former president of the United States, Joe Biden, as well, who also had a one-on-one meeting with Pope Francis. So that is what's happening in real time. Also happening in real time, of course, is the elections that we're following very closely here, and that is the race for mayor of New York City. And if it's a new day, there's a new poll that comes out, and once again, the front runner, far above everybody else, is the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. This poll was done by the Honan Strategy Group. So I want to talk to the CEO and president of the Honan Strategy Group, Bradley Honan, about this poll, how they kind of worked it all out. It's one of the first ones since we've learned the news that Mayor Eric Adams is running as an independent. So, Bradley, great to have you here.
Thanks so much. Nice to see you.
So let me get your take on how exactly you conducted this poll first and foremost, right? And once again, we see Andrew Cuomo far and away the front runner here and actually increased by 4 percentage points from the last poll you did. So walk us through the methodology here.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking about this, because this is really important to get underneath the hood. We have polled two groups of Democratic primary voters at this critical inflection point following the news that Mayor Adams is no longer going to be a candidate in the Democratic primary. Segment one were voters who have confirmed Democratic primary voting history, because when we look at registered voters, we see 2 out of 3 of them are regularly not participating and missing in major elections, let alone primary political races at the municipal election. The second segment of voters are those who are comprised of what we call anti-Trump surge voters. These are voters that, had Harris been elected in November, probably wouldn't be considering voting in June. But Trump is creating energy and momentum in the left flank, and we see those voters wanting to cast a ballot in response to Trump. He's not on the ballot, but they're becoming politically engaged and they're woken up. So we polled both of those segments to try and understand what the proper composition of voters heading into June is going to be.
Okay, and you've done a number of polls, right? January, February, March, April. You've done 4 polls so far. And I just want to kind of go through this when you take a look at it, because Andrew Cuomo began in January, 35%. And he once again was far and away the front runner. The next one was Zohran Mamdani at 9% back in January. Now we jump to April, 45% for Andrew Cuomo. So he's increased by about 10 percentage points since January. And Zohran Mamdani, 22%. Everybody else is in the single digits. So talk to us about what you've seen amongst this field of candidates.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that Andrew Cuomo has momentum in this race right now, and he is far and away the front runner. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, Trump is creating an enormous shadow on New York City politics right now, and voters are looking for a strong leader who can go head to head with Trump, and they see that as being Andrew Cuomo. Second, I think that voters are hearing the attacks against Cuomo where there's not a lot of political oxygen going around. And when you say to the average Democratic primary voter, Cuomo and COVID, it's a positive, not a negative. So I think the punches are not landing on Cuomo. And in fact, they're probably serving to prop him up.
Yeah, and just, I've spoken to a number of candidates along the way who have said that their attacks against Andrew Cuomo really haven't even begun yet. Number one, because they haven't met him on the stage anywhere. He won't show up to the forums, and the debates haven't begun yet. And a lot of these candidates that are in the single digits, I'm talking about Brad Lander, Adrienne Adams, Scott Stringer, Zelmore Myrie, Jessica Ramos, Whitney Tilson, they say they're holding their ad dollars and their ads for later in the election cycle. But I want to talk about ranked choice voting for a second, because that is something that New York is still relatively new to, right? Where you get to go in and cast a number of ballots. You said that while you performed this simulation, it was largely an academic exercise. So can you talk about what exactly you meant by that?
Absolutely. So the city rules of engagement right now are the mayoral race, and others are going to be decided by ranked choice voting, where we need to get down to only two candidates standing. And before we even begin that simulation in earnest, Cuomo is over 50%. So you have to win 50%, and then ranked choice voting has to run through as many rounds as it takes to get down to just two candidates. So he starts before the first pitch is thrown or before the end of the first inning. Cuomo's already got the 50% plus 3 in this case in order to win the race. We did go through the simulation. That's what the Board of Elections will do. And it comes down to Cuomo against Mondami, and he wins pretty handily, 64 to 36. So he's clearly got a lot of momentum right now. And I think one of the reasons that the race right now is so relatively consistent, Cuomo, Mondami, and then everybody else, is a lot of the negatives that you mentioned, I think, are baked into people's minds in terms of how they are thinking about this race. And in fact, we didn't ask it in this survey, but when we've asked Andrew Cuomo's favorability in the past, we find voters that have an unfavorable opinion of Cuomo who ultimately vote for him. So whatever qualms they may have, they see him as a strong leader. They see him delivering bold leadership. They believe his COVID record and the response to that pandemic being very, very positive. So I don't see a scenario where all these negatives are going to come out in TV ads and the race is going to fluctuate all that dramatically, because I think these are baked in to voter sentiments about who Cuomo is and who some of the other candidates are at this point.
Has any of your polls along the way, and forgive me for not knowing this information, but have they ever looked at issue-based polling on what the number one issue is for somebody headed to the ballot box?
Yes, absolutely. It's moving around a little bit. It was crime and quality of life, with housing second. I think that's largely the same. I think housing is becoming a bigger issue. Crime and corruption is really turning into concerns about corruption and mismanagement at City Hall. And Donald Trump in every poll is becoming a more and more dominant figure in terms of how people are thinking about what the issues are. Yes, we have issues to deal with here in New York City, but increasingly he's creating the shadow. And I think he's creating a halo for Andrew Cuomo and creating a real separation between Cuomo, who's seen as a strong leader, and the other candidates who they don't think are up to the task of managing the city and standing up to Trump in a way they're hoping that Andrew Cuomo would do.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because the number one issue that I hear from voters is, of course, the economy, number one, and crime, mental health issues, so on and so forth, as their number two, including the migrant crisis, right? And some would say that the attack ads against Andrew Cuomo haven't begun yet. And what I mean by that is that while you take away the COVID situation with the nursing homes, take away the sexual assault allegations against Andrew Cuomo, there is something to be said about what passed while he was governor in terms of some of the crime and legislation around things that contributed to recidivism and folks, criminals being put back on the street.
What we're hearing from voters right now is they are concerned about crime. They are all concerned about quality of life. But the voting population is very much over 50 and over 65. And when there are huge gyrations in the stock market, when there are concerns about the viability of Social Security, where Musk is talking about it being a Ponzi scheme, that's sending shivers up and down the spines of the average voter who's either retired or approaching retirement. And so what Andrew Cuomo may or may not have done on bail reform 6 or 7 years ago pales in comparison to what they see are the looming threats coming out of Washington. And I think that's why the focus is more on how does New York City Trump-proof itself? How does the city voters feel that we need to have a leader who can stand up to Trump? And I think that strong leadership credential appears to be going to Andrew Cuomo in their mind. That's what we've seen in almost 4,000 interviews in the polls that we've done over the last 4 months.
And almost because he is somebody who had to have that one-on-one dialogue with the president during a very important time for the country, which of course was COVID.
Exactly, and that's what, again, when these attacks are made against Cuomo, Cuomo COVID, for most people it's strong, decisive, bold leadership and going toe-to-toe against Trump. And in the eyes of Democratic primary voters in New York City, providing the kind of leadership they were hoping to see from the White House and President Trump, which became Andrew Cuomo's opportunity as a default to lead. So I think that's where you're absolutely right. They've seen this play out. They think that New York did as best we could under those scenarios, and they're not necessarily looking for any of these candidates. And I would just say, historically, I think the last comptroller, you mentioned Brad Lander and Scott Stringer, who ascended to mayor, was Abe Bean. We've seen in Adrian Adams a number of city council speakers run and their campaigns flamed out. There's a long, long list of those.
Christine Quinn.
So the question is, what's Christine Quinn, Peter Vallone, Gifford Miller? There's a long, long list of those people that flail in their efforts. And again, I think this is a unique time where voters are looking for somebody strong, somebody tested, somebody who can manage. And what they're telling us is consistently, that's Andrew Cuomo, and attacks be damned. Attacks remind them of, in their minds, something that he did, which was very, very positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in talking to a number of political analysts along the way, when you look at a poll like this and you see somebody like Whitney Tilson, who from January to April was at goose egg 0%. Michael Blake went from 3% back down to 0%. Jessica Ramos from 6% down to 2%. Zelnor Myrie 3% to 2%. Scott Stringer 8% to 3%. They're losing momentum, not gaining. And so it becomes a, when do they either drop out and coalesce around somebody else? I don't know how that plays out or how you see it playing out.
My 13-year-old son, Ben, does impulse shopping when we're at the grocery store, when he grabs candy as we're heading to the checkout. I don't think voters are looking to make an impulse purchase right now in this climate for mayor. And so I think that's why candidates that are not well defined, that don't have strong records, that are not well known as delivering on specific issues, are at a real weak point. I think some people say, well, Cuomo's so well known, he's so well liked. Well, Stringer's also pretty well liked as well. The difference, I don't think, the difference is he's not defined around delivering on specific issues in a way that Cuomo is. So if this is just about who do you want to have a beer with, you'd expect to be seeing the race between Andrew Cuomo and Scott Stringer. But you're not, because voters are thinking about who they want as their next mayor in a lot more sophisticated and sober of a manner, rather than just the proverbial who you want to have a beer with.
Got it. Bradley Honan, CEO and president of the Honan Strategy Group. You have another poll coming out in May?
We'll see. I think we will. Will.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for coming on today, shedding light on this poll. Fascinating stuff.
Thanks so much.
Good. All right. And don't forget, everybody, by the way, PIX 11 was just selected for the very first time ever to host for the first time citywide races. We are looking at the first week of June for a number of debates that we're going to be holding, including the race for comptroller, the race for public advocate, and if anything does shape up on the Republican side of the mayoral election, we are picked to do that debate as well. So all of that coming at you in June. But it is a busy time in politics. We're with you till the end. For now, that's another edition of Pop Daily. I'm Dan Mannarino. Have a great day.